Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 797. My opponent kicked off with e4, and I went with e5, going for a traditional opening, and my opponent does too. He goes knight f3, I go knight c6, and he goes bishop b5. All top choices there, and this is the Ruy Lopez. I play the Morphy defense, a6. I don't go for the Berlin. He drops his bishop back. The Berlin, by the way, is the immediate knight to f6, the second choice there, which has gotten real popular at the top levels, although mainly as a drawing weapon for black. But this is more of a fighting game and more of a long game when you play like this, the main line of the Ruy. Let's see. So I go knight f6. That's also the main move, just attacking this pawn. And then top choice for white is to castle. And then if black takes the pawn, that's the open Ruy Lopez, and white eventually gets the pawn back or gets some other compensation. So that's fine. Or the closed Ruy Lopez, where black just defends the center and plays a little more slowly. But d3, the second choice there, is still a decent way for white to play, and just avoiding a lot of theory and setting up a solid position in the center. And now this pawn really is under some fire. There's always the threat now of bishop takes knight, followed by knight takes pawn, and because there's the white c pawn is securely defended, I don't have counter pressure on that, so that's just a pawn grab for white that works, I think. So the normal move here is to defend with d6, and then white typically continues in the big build-up with c3, building up slowly towards a big center, also giving this bishop a retreat square so that I don't get to trade this knight against this bishop, which is sometimes, well, you see that happen in this game. It's sometimes a useful thing to do. So yeah, my opponent avoided that and instead went with the move bishop g5, a pretty rare move here. And after this, the game is more or less even. So somehow white is giving up the opening advantage here. It's not immediately clear why, but I mean, it's easy enough to unpin. And then he played knight bd2, just continuing with this development. Let's see. So I can say, so anyway, I kicked the bishop here, and then he just retreated the bishop back to e3. I castle, and he plays h3. So I can say one thing is that this is kind of slow, and he hasn't done anything about his bishop here, and he just lets me trade it off. So now we're in the range where things are about even. White's given up that opening advantage here, and I start going after that bishop with b5. The chess engine approves of this sequence, so I think it's okay. Knight a5, and he has nowhere to go. He plays a3, but I can just trade off that bishop. And actually, it's funny, but chess engine much prefers c takes b3. I think maybe getting a rook to the c file, and well, I would probably play c5 immediately, because that's part of my plan to expand here. But white can also undermine with b4. Seems to give white a little more play than what he had in the game. When he takes back with the knight, I still expand on the queen side, and his knight is kind of in the way of these pawns here. So, and it doesn't have many good squares to go to. I mean, it can come out here, but the queen will take it. It's not making any progress looking at the d4 square, so probably just has to go back where it came from. So all in all, a slow setup, and by this point, black is starting to get some kind of advantage. Let's see, he castled here. I go bishop b7. Yeah, and he brings his knight back, knight bd2, and queen c7. So pretty comfortable position for black. I'm able to get my pieces out and get them pretty well organized here, and have more space on the queen side. And I have the bishop pair for some kind of long-term edge. Let's see, he went knight h2. The chess engine really wants to play c4 here and just clamp down on my idea of playing d5, which I get in the game. Basically, the idea with d5 is just open things up a little bit for the bishops. And he played knight h2, which allows that. So the chess engine is already starting to give black some kind of winning edge, although I play some imprecise moves later, so the game the game continues, maybe longer than it should have. Let's see, he brings his knight back to b3 to take a look at my c-pawn. Let's see, he could try knight g4 here. This is interesting. but it's asking for trouble. After knight g4, I can play d4 and trap the bishop. So one good thing about knight b3 is it gave the bishop a retreat square. Here you can see the bishop has nowhere to go. But Chess Engine thinks this is actually the best line for white at this point, is to go ahead and sack the bishop for 2 pawns there, and then retreat this knight to a good perch on f5 and just prepare to attack and try and get compensation that way. But black has an advantage here. But it gives white some fighting chances. So knight back to b3. It saves the bishop, but it loses a pawn. So basically, if we back up to this move, knight h2, after knight h2 and I play d5, then there's no way to avoid the loss of material there. Let's see, d5. I guess one other idea maybe would be to take, but that's just helping me get my pieces out. So it's hard to believe that's so great. I could take with the knight hitting his bishop, and I could line up my queen and my bishop on this diagonal too. So anyway, yeah, it looks like after knight h2, black is in trouble. And knight b3, yeah, saves the bishop but loses the pawn. I go ahead and grab it, and he goes queen e2. So this is a point. Well, no, I go c4. This is still a good move. He goes knight d2. So at this point, I start making moves that are slightly less than the best moves, and let white get back into the game. Basically, the Chess Engine says that the game is over at this point, and gives this line with c3, which I really didn't think much about. I mean, I was a little worried about this somewhat loose piece on e4, right? It's attacked once and defended once, so that makes it a little bit loose. So if this bishop moves with tempo, the knight really is hanging. But this is a forcing move, and if he takes the pawn, which is probably best, then I can take back with the knight, and you can see his queenside pawn structure is a wreck. I've got this excellent piece on c3, and I'm kicking his queen around, and I still have this battery against the g2 pawn as well to think about. So queen to c3 is the idea here. And like I said, I have the bishop pair in an open position, so that looks all good for black. Let's see, instead of taking pawn, he could try taking the knight. But after c takes b2, I get to grab another pawn because I'm hitting that rook. The rook has to move, and then I can get this back. And this is also an excellent position for black. Let's see. Well, it's still just 1 pawn up. I think it's more about the activity of my pieces. And well, I'm piling up on this. Although when he takes here, yeah, I'm also taking here. Yeah, I guess he's not getting his material back, so I'm going to stay a couple pawns up. Good position for white or black once again. So knight takes d2 is kind of letting him off the hook a little bit. He took with the bishop, and I went bishop f6. And once again, not the most precise move. The the Chess Engine wants to play queen c6 first, threaten on g2. He blocks with the knight, and then play bishop f6. And that's a little better. We get into a similar kind of position. The thing is, after bishop f6, he could have immediately gone with knight g4 to harass my bishop, and that's, then you kind of wonder why you put the bishop on f6. But you see, that was the point of playing queen c6 there, force the knight to go to a different square, and then play bishop f6. So that little nuance there is actually a pretty big improvement in black's position. So anyway, the direct bishop f6, well, he didn't go for knight g4, but went queen g4, threatening this pawn over here. And yeah, now the game is back in the range of, I have an advantage because I have the extra pawn, but it's not a clear win for black anymore. It's just some kind of edge, less than a pawn advantage, actually. The Chess Engine rates it as, because it's a little bit of trouble to hold on to this pawn, and he gets some play against it. Anyway, I went king h8 so that he couldn't take on h6 there with his bishop. So here's another funny Chess Engine line for you. Instead of playing king h8, Chess Engine says I can play e4 here. Let him take the pawn, and then go bishop to e5. So, oh yeah, that's this square. So I'm piling up with the queen and the bishop against the knight there, and the knight has no moves. The queen The pawn is guarding that square, and the rook is on that square. So very hard to defend the knight there. And you can't move it, you can't defend it. And if he plays, let's see, if he brings the bishop back, I can just take the bishop. Yeah. So if he plays g3 to block, then f5 kicks the queen away. And yeah, bad things start to happen. So it's just funny. I guess if the queen goes here, I can harass it with the bishop. If it goes here, I can harass it with the rook and pick up his bishop over there. So anyway, he can't, it seems like even if I don't play king h8, it's not really safe for him to take that pawn, but I do have to find this e4 move to give the bishop e5 resource to get that into the position. Anyway, king h8 is a simpler way to play, and it keeps my pawn advantage. So the game continues, and I just stay a pawn up for the next set of moves, and we just trade into a simpler kind of position. And I really am looking forward to getting the minor pieces off and getting rid of some of these complications. But I actually blunder here with f6. I kind of realized this after I made this move. This bishop just has no retreat squares, and he can immediately attack it with h4, and he probably should. So the chess engine is giving this line, just get the king back to g8, so all these pawns are defended over here. He might play queen to f3 and then g6, and just continue to play from this position. I got my rook over here, so my bishop can actually slide around like this. Might be useful. I don't know, it seems a bit tricky. He's kind of piling up on this e-pawn, but anyway, the chess engine still likes black there. After f6, probably this is about even. He should just play h4 immediately and challenge that bishop. And it turns out the bishop can survive, so it's not like I'm losing. It's like I said, about even. Bishop f4. If he goes g3, this is kind of funny. He goes g3 to trap my bishop. I have f5 to trap his rook. And this pawn is defended, and his rook has no square. So it's a trade of a bishop for a rook, and I win the exchange. So after bishop f4, he can't really continue to harass it. He has to play, well, queen h5 is a suggestion from the chess engine. Sorry, queen h5 was a chess engine suggestion. After queen b6, then coming over here to f5, and then drop this rook down, maybe making space to bring my queen over, and the game continues. Yeah, so f6 was a big blunder, although, you know, I was getting tired of defending this pawn. So I was looking for an easy solution, but it was a bad idea, trapping my bishop, a self-trap with a bishop. Anyway, he didn't take advantage of that. He just played queen f3 here. Let's see, so we get a few more moves. I make one more mistake. I push h5 a moment too soon. I should actually play queen g6 first. I kind of realize this in the game. There's a pin here. And after I play h5, this bishop is a little bit loose, and he can just take on e5 here. I pretty much have to trade out. Rook takes, but I can't ever take the last piece that lands there because my queen is hanging. So I just give the pawn back, and it's really an even game after that. So anyway, he played bishop d2, challenging my bishop, and like I said, I was looking to go into a heavy piece endgame, so I was happy to see this. And so now we're in this endgame where I am a pawn up once again, and well, I always was a pawn up because he never took advantage of his chances, but at least the chess engine rates it as a pawn up, which means I have good chances in this endgame, and I do okay. I push these pawns forward slowly. Important not to go too fast in this endgame, and I go for these trades when he offers them, when I think they won't cause me some immediate disadvantage, because the closer I get to that endgame, the easier it is for me to play. And so we finally get the rook and pawn endgame, and I get my rook, and then I start penetrating with my king. And if he ever trades, I just get a passed pawn here, protected passed pawn. So that's good for me. And eventually I get forward as far as possible and decide to just trade rooks myself. And I push the pawns forward, and I'm just starting to run him out of moves here. And yeah, it looks like this is a key move to break through here, this g3 push. And if he takes, I'll take back, and his king can't get over and harass these pawns. He goes here, and I'll go behind my pawn, and his king has to step back, and I'll be able to step to the side of the pawn. So that's why after I push, he pushes, and then I took. One interesting thing I was wondering about during the game was if I still win if I play e3, and this does win. The thing is, I have to find another way to penetrate with my king. This is what I was worried about. His pawn is guarding that square. Let's draw the arrows the other way. His pawns are guarding these two squares, so I can't penetrate in the middle. Let's see. Yeah, I can't. My king were over here. His pawns are also guarding these squares, so I can't penetrate on this side. But I can come in on the queen side, so I could play something like this. And his king has to stay over here in front of the pawn. And then when I push a5, he's in Zugzwang. He's got to kind of stay inside the square of this pawn, and he also wants to keep my king out of here, but it's his turn to move, so he has to back up. Let's see, and I can step forward with my king, and well, if he plays king to b1, then I can push this pawn forward immediately, but no matter what he plays, yeah, after king to b3, if he doesn't go to this square, then he has to step away, and then I'm taking these pawns on the queen side, and I break through that way. So so it is a straightforward win, but that's a key point here, is that you have to, if you're going to lock things up like that, sometimes it can be an easy win, but you have to make sure there's a route in for your king, and you have the tempo moves if necessary to break any blockade. So I wasn't sure about that, and I didn't calculate that far ahead. I just took here because I saw that I could break through this way. And he took with the king, just makes my maneuvering easier. I protected the pawn, and then he resigned. It's just going to be a losing endgame. He can't come forward anymore. He's got to step back, and then my king can step forward, and I'll just make progress step by step, get a passed pawn over here, and either queen it or or run over and take these pawns. So either way, it's an easy end game win. So interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you again soon. Bye.